happy day for the people at Boeing because it sets in motion the final steps of governmental approval necessary for us to consummate the merger between Boeing and McDonnell Douglas.
In 1997, Boeing acquired plane maker McDonnell Douglas in a $13 billion stock swap, which led to Boeing turning the MD-95 into the new Boeing 717. Oh, and it led to something else too. The two deadly MAX crashes of late 2018 and early 2019. Let's talk about it next on Maximus. Pilots start some new Boeing planes by turning a knob and flipping just two switches. Other aircraft like Airbus are just as easy. However, the Boeing MAX, the newest passenger jet on the market, works differently. Pilots still follow roughly the same 7 steps used on the first 737 nearly 53 years ago. Shut off the cabin's air conditioning, redirect the airflow, switch on the engine, start the fuel, revert the airflow, turn the air conditioning back on, then turn on the generator. The 737 MAX is a legacy of its past, built on decades-old systems, many that date back to the original version. The strategy to keep updating the plane rather than starting from scratch offered competitive advantages. Pilots were comfortable flying it, and airlines didn't have to invest in costly new training for their pilots or mechanics. For Boeing, it was also faster and cheaper to redesign and recertify than to start anew. But the strategy has now left the company in crisis, following 2 deadly crashes of its flagship MAX 737 less than 5 months apart. The MAX stretched the 737 design, creating a patchwork plane that left pilots without some safety features that could be important in a crisis. Features, in fact, that have been offered for dozens of years on other planes throughout the industry. Yet, it is only the modern Boeing 737 MAX jet that lacks an electronic alert system that clearly explains what is malfunctioning at the time and how to resolve it. Instead, MAX pilots have to check a bulky hard copy manual. The MAX also required makeshift solutions to keep the plane flying, much like its ancestors. However, over time, these workarounds have indeed compromised safety. McDonnell Douglas was run into the ground by its leadership team after McDonnell and Douglas, 2 separate companies, merged in 1967. For example, in the 30 years between the merger and when it merged with Boeing, McDonnell Douglas never launched a new commercial airplane. All it did was both shrink and extend existing airframes to save money. If that sounds familiar, that's because it should. The DC-9 was stretched into the MD-81, then the 82, 83, and 88. Then it was stretched again and re-engined into the MD-90, which subsequently was shrunk and re-engined yet again into the MD-95, now of course known as the Boeing 717. The DC-10 was truly the last airplane that McDonnell Douglas launched more than 50 years ago. So when the DC-10 began to age, what was McDonnell Douglas's solution? The same lazy trait that Boeing had adopted. They stretched it into the poor-performing MD-11. That plane was eventually relegated to freighter duty, and the plane is even barely suitable for that task. Sure, Mickey D's had released plans to do something new, but those never really made it beyond the pretty pictures and investor bait stages. The bean counters got conservative, failed to innovate, and ran that company into the ground. Again, does that sound familiar? McDonnell Douglas was in really bad shape by the 1990s. It wasn't likely to survive as a commercial aircraft manufacturer on its own. However, it wouldn't be exactly accurate to say that the Boeing-McDonnell Douglas merger killed 2 fine companies, because you see, McDonnell Douglas was perfectly capable of killing itself on its own. For Boeing, it's a somewhat different story. While the infusion of the McDonnell Douglas California mindset and culture made things worse, to be sure, Boeing was already headed down that path on their own. For example, Boeing had the troubled launch of the brand new from the ground up 787 as a result of its cost-effective outsourcing of manufacturing around the globe. Beyond that, consider what Boeing's big picture projects are today. The 777X and the 737 MAX. They're both just stretched versions of their earlier selves. And to be fair, until the MAX, they were damn fine airplanes. However, much like the MAX, we really don't know yet if the 777X version will be up to the task of the original Lucky 7s. Don't forget, while still on the ground, the very first 777X exploded dramatically in front of the FAA during its pressurization tests. So it's going to take some time in the air to see what bugs, if any, will show their ugly heads. Then there is the once dreamed about new mid-sized airplane, the mythical so-called 797, which was to replace the 757 and 67. That iteration now has all but been killed off in the wake of the MAX 737 disasters. Moreover, who knows if the 797 will ever even see the light of day. Had Boeing chosen a different path many years ago, there probably wouldn't even be a need to be discussing a 797 at all. We need to take a closer look at the 737 MAX, the 797, and the Bombardier C-Series to truly understand how Boeing took a long walk off a short pier. Some of you may remember Boeing's response to the C-Series, an airplane it didn't compete with, but was trying to kill through politics and massive tariffs. If you're not familiar with the Boeing C-Series, I'll leave a link down below. Maybe we'll do a video on that story later on. But what Boeing should have done, and imagine this, Boeing should have acquired the C-Series outright and touted it as the company's replacement for the 737-700 line. Instead, Boeing lost the tariff battle and Airbus swooped in, turning the C-Series into the A220, a powerful airplane with no real competition. Boeing now had to settle for its joint venture with Embraer. The problem is that the Embraer E2 is far from a replacement for the 737-700. It's a much smaller airplane and it lacks the range. Southwest will have to order an airplane smaller than the 737 MAX 8 someday, and the 220 would have been a no-brainer under Boeing's umbrella. Now Boeing has to push Southwest to another manufacturer to replace the 737-700 because Boeing has nothing. But wait, you might ask, isn't the MAX a replacement for the 737-700? Not even close. The 737 MAX 7 was dead on arrival. Southwest ordered 30 of them, but it modified the order to take only 7 in the near term. The other 23 have been deferred out several years. That's hardly a vote of confidence considering it has over 500 737-700s that will need replacing soon. WestJet had the only other significant order for the MAX 7. It has also deferred its initial deliveries and seemed more interested in the bigger version. That's until the crashes and the coronavirus pandemic. Now, all bets are off the table. MAX is really highlighting the MAX 8, 9, and 10 size category. It competes with the A320 and A321 airplanes, but it doesn't really have the range and capabilities of the Neo. Boeing made the fateful decision to rush out the MAX to compete with the Neo after Airbus announced its launching. Airbus put Boeing in a really tough position. If Boeing had went ahead and built a clean sheet airplane, that would have given a several-year lead to Airbus. Instead, as we all know, it modified the 737 into the MAX, and that has led us to where we are today. Even with all the work they put into turning the MAX into something great, it can't do what the Neo does. The Neo, especially with the new A321 XLR version, can comfortably replace not only its own A320, but the 737 family of aircraft as well as the 757. Boeing doesn't have that luxury. The MAX 10 has more than double the capacity of the original 737-100. This airplane has been stretched out so much that it doesn't seem possible to gain the range and performance of the A321 XLR with the same airframe. Yet if Boeing had gone with a clean sheet design for a 737 replacement, it would have given Airbus a head start. That being said, it would have set itself up better for the future, and that might look something like this. The C-Series could cover up to 150 seats. A 737 replacement could cover from 157 to 225, and then the 787 could take over from there as the 767 replacement. Same capacity, but pull out range and modify as necessary to gain efficiency to match the A330 Neo, as well as replacing the 777-200. Then the 777 can continue the line with a 777-300ER. Not saying all that would work, but it's an idea. So that just leaves us with the 777X. It's a really big airplane. However, it probably has limited appeal, especially in a post-pandemic world. Some say the 777X is another platform that probably shouldn't have diverted engineering resources away from more important projects. Now Boeing finds itself cornered. Does it launch a new 737 replacement and cannibalize its own MAX program? Probably not. Most likely it needs to wait until there's new technology to help it leapfrog the MAX and whatever Airbus has up its sleeve for the future. If only Boeing had taken a different path years ago, it wouldn't be in this predicament today. Well, there you go. There's a lot in there to consider. So after you've considered it, please leave a comment down below. As always, be sure to like, subscribe, share, and ring the bell. And until next time, leave the rubber on the runway and your troubles on the ground. And I will see you in the air. Yeah, this is Maximus.